Well, we held off for 5 months, but we're finally looking at an adaptation by the king. Stephen King, that is. We had to talk about him at some point, or when we ran out of other adaptations, we'd simply be a Stephen King adaptation show. Still might end up that way for that matter. Instead of looking at something that's been adapted twice like It, or one of the other heavy hitters like The Shining or The Dead Zone, we're going to look at one of the lesser known but no less fun adaptations. Silver Bullet may be a fun werewolf movie, but its adaptation and what the novella originally started as is a fun story. Look for the man with the missing eye as we find out what the happened to this adaptation.
The Bible tells us not to fear the terror that creepeth by night, or that which flieth by noonday. And yet we do. We do.
Silver Bullet is the 1985 adaptation of Cycle of the Werewolf, a novella written by Stephen King that came out in 1983. This was the 10th adaptation of a King property already, and was one of the many produced by Dino De Laurentiis. Some of these movies were incredibly popular with high critical praise and even Academy Award nominations, as with Carrie. Nearly all of these were very profitable, or at least profitable enough to keep the King train rolling. Silver Bullet was a misstep in both. It wasn't a critical darling, nor did it make nearly as much money as its peers within its other movies. It was released in October of 1985 with a budget of $7 million, and in the US at least, it only brought back $5 million, even if the total global take was $15 million. The movie stars Corey Haim, Gary Busey, Terry O'Quinn, and Everett McGill. The screenplay was penned by King himself, and it was directed by Daniel Attias. Haim, of course, had somewhat of a tragic life, but left an indelible mark on cinema with his being part of the two Coreys along with Corey Feldman. Silver Bullet was before all that, and he would do classics like License to Drive, Lost Boys, and Lucas before falling into problems and ultimately obscurity and death. Gary Busey in a lot of ways is another tragic story, but had a much better career. He started his career in the late 60s and would appear in things like one of the Magnificent Seven sequels, A Star is Born, and an Oscar nomination for the Buddy Holly story. He would follow this movie with classic roles in Lethal Weapon, Predator 2, Under Siege, and many, many more. A near-fatal motorcycle accident would forever alter him, but there would still be great roles for him to have. Terry O'Quinn has been discussed on this channel at length, but my favorite role of his is as Peter in Millennium. Finally, there's Everett McGill as the tragic reverend who stalks and kills as a werewolf. He delivers a powerhouse performance in the Wes Craven classic The People Under the Stairs, but is undoubtedly best known for his turn on Twin Peaks. We'll get into Stephen King the author as well as the novella more in the next section, but Hollywood Stevie King has much more than you'd guess. Sure, he's credited with a billion things, as anything that was adapted from his property he gets a name drop, but he has shown up on screen nearly 30 times, both in his own properties as well as things like Sons of Anarchy. He directed the ill-fated but awesome Maximum Overdrive, something so torturous for him that he hasn't directed a movie since. He did the screenplays for Creepshow, Cat's Eye, Pet Sematary, Sleepwalkers, and a slew of other things. Daniel Attias, or Attias, has had a hell of a career as a director, still working today in fact, with tons of TV shows. And actually, that's it. He never directed another movie after this, but probably directed an episode of one of your top 3 TV shows ever.
Hey, you're right, stupid science bitch couldn't even make I More Smarter!
An interesting fact about the movie is that Phantasm creator Don Coscarelli was hired to direct, but left the project when he had creative differences with producer Dino De Laurentiis. The book, or novella in this case, is an interesting one. Listed as a novelette in the movie, Cycle of the Werewolf was originally supposed to be a calendar of all things. I learned this after reading it for my book club, shout out to Richie and Adeline by the way, and the gorgeous pictures found in the book were used to represent one for each month. It was also used as a framing device for the full moon, even if that isn't fully astrologically accurate. King found the size and amount of words he was able to put towards artist Bernie Wrightson's pictures to be problematic. While the format stayed the same with King more or less making 12 different vignettes, there is some more cohesion given to them. It's his shortest standalone book by far and is shorter than some of the novellas collected in his other short story collections. In the interest of brevity on a YouTube video, I'll keep this relatively short, but Stephen King is written horror. His first published novel was Carrie in 1974, and when he inevitably publishes at least one work next year, he will have been active for 50 years. His legacy is cemented and his impact immeasurable. Even if, for some strange reason, you haven't heard the name, you know something of his work. There is no doubt he will be covered in this series again, just as he will be covered in all manner of other shows we have on the channel. Thank you, sir, for everything, even Maximum Overdrive.
I'm gonna scare the hell out of you.
Well, the overall story is the same here. A werewolf begins terrorizing a town, killing people off as it sees fit in the town of Tarker's Mills. Bodies are found mutilated, from women in their homes to a 12-year-old boy named Brady who was just trying to fly his kite at night. It turns out local Reverend Lowe is the culprit and even has a very vivid dream. In the book's case, it's a chapter on the month of May, where his entire congregation turns into werewolves through his own guilt and sadness of being the creature. Marty Coleslaw and his sister become central figures in the story around the 4th of July, and when it gets cancelled, Marty ends up shooting a firecracker into the monster's eye, forcing it to become half-blind. Marty is confined to a wheelchair, and the fireworks were given to him by his uncle, who felt bad that the 4th celebrations were cancelled. Someone from the Coleslaw family tells the police. They don't really believe it's a werewolf causing the destruction, but investigate the situation anyway and are killed by the wolf. Through a process of elimination, Marty and his sister find out who the werewolf is when they find the adult in town that has a new eye patch. Marty sends the Reverend notes that he needs to kill himself in order to stop the cycle, but the Reverend can't, and he doesn't want to either. Marty and his sister get their uncle to melt down some silver to make bullets out of, and also stay with them. The werewolf attacks, and Marty's able to shoot it dead before it can kill any of them. As it dies, it changes back into Reverend Lowe. While the main story is the same, including where it takes place, who the werewolf is, and many character names, a lot was added or changed. The novella can be read in less time than it takes to watch the movie, and you have to fill in time somewhere. First, some of the more minor changes. Kate Coleslaw in the book becomes Jane, Uncle Al in the book is now Red, and the Father Herman becomes Bob. Why these changes is something that only King would know, but my guess is that it allowed him to make the changes while keeping the story the same, or he wanted to keep it fresh. Some other minor changes are the kid's uncle making 2 silver bullets in the book versus 1 in the movie. Marty in both mediums kills the Lycan, using both bullets in the book and only 1 in the movie. Uncle Red builds Marty an awesome gasoline-propelled wheelchair in the movie, while in the book he just has the standard model. The movie also makes Marty and the Coleslaw family important from the beginning, where the novella doesn't introduce them until about halfway through. There's a handful of other minor changes here, but it's probably easiest to go month by month. January is where a railroad worker is killed in his shack. The movie opens with a similar scene where a worker is slaughtered on the tracks, but the town just assumes he got drunk and was killed by a train. February has the lovelorn Stella Randolph killed in a room by the wolf, where she, dare I say, enjoys being ripped apart. This has a movie counterpart as well, where a woman is dumped by her lover after telling him she's pregnant. She attempts suicide by pills before the werewolf does the job for her. March has a drifter being killed while also bringing up an abusive husband who will later die. While not expressly said in the movie, the father of Marty's friend who dies in the shed out back gives off strong abuse vibes. April is where young Brady is killed while flying his kite at night. This happens nearly identical as it does in the book, but is followed by a mob that goes after the wolf. The mob is attacked with a few of them dying, and while this scene is completely absent from the book, by November the town is on high alert and actively hunting or keeping watch against further wolf attacks. May brings in the dream sequence. In the book, it's just the introduction to the Reverend, but the film shows us a dream of the service after he kills 3 of the hunters. June is a completely separate chapter from the film, with the wolf attacking the diner, while no such scene exists in the film at all. July is nearly identical, with Marty getting fireworks from his uncle and shooting the eye out, but here is the introduction to all the Coleslaw characters and the uncle, while the movie has them, especially Uncle Red, as a main character from the start. It's the longest chapter apart from the ending, and both of those are the closest to the movie. August is a similar scene, with the authorities being warned and not believing it's a werewolf, but being killed by the creature. The difference here is that human Reverend knows it's Marty and tries to kill him by running him off the road. The sheriff finds the paint chips from Marty's chair on the Reverend's car before he's killed. September is another chapter like the diner that's just missing completely from the film, where a farmer's pigs are killed. It makes complete sense for the story, but doesn't really translate to the film very well with the focus on the Coleslaw family. October is where Marty finds out who the werewolf is via trick-or-treating, while the film has his sister collecting bottles and cans from the town, finally delivering them to a one-eyed Reverend. November deals with the Reverend getting the notes to tell him to end it all, with a final one signed by young Marty, which is how Lowe finds out near the end. He also finally kills the abusive husband the book has discussed a few times. Finally, December is where everything comes to a head. While the book's main conceit is 12 months worth of werewolf action, the movie takes place over a far shorter time. They both end the same way with Marty shooting the Reverend, but the book takes place on New Year's Eve. With both mediums being so short, it's easy to go over all the differences between the two. The hard part is choosing which one's better. They're both minor additions to their categories. Silver Bullet is one of the slept-on King adaptations, and Cycle is a very short one-off, albeit a unique one. As much as I enjoy Silver Bullet, I used to watch it on TNT and TBS all the time, and I own the Scream Factory Blu-ray, I have to give this one to the story, if nothing else just for how cool and unique it is. It's also an easy way for non-readers to get in the world of Stephen King. Let us know in the comments which you prefer, and we'll see you at the next full moon.